PT, I didn't bother raising my voice when the HOA president slammed her fist on the table and accused me of sabotaging community development. Instead, I just slid the packet of mineral rights records across the polished oak and watched. Her lawyer's face drained of color as he flipped through page after notarized page. The silence that fell in that room wasn't accidental, it was the weight of a mistake they couldn't undo. I had spent months preparing for that moment, and when it came, I didn't need to yell. All I needed to do was let the county clerk's stamps and my grandfather's signature speak louder than any threat they had thrown at me before any of this mess started. I wasn't looking for a fight. I had inherited the land after my father passed, about 20 acres of rolling fields on the edge of a subdivision that had grown up around it over the last 30 years. To me, it was never about development or money. It was about connection. That field was where my grandfather had broken the soil with a mule-drawn plow, where my dad taught me how to work fence lines, and where I found my own peace after a career that had worn me thin. I'd drive out most weekends, walk the tree line, sometimes sit by the old well that hadn't drawn water in decades, just to remind myself what quiet felt like. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I wasn't even living there full-time. I just wanted that piece of family history intact, a place to breathe, to mend, and maybe someday pass on. The HOA didn't see it that way. To them, my field was unused common land, though it was very clearly not theirs. The first shot they fired was a notice taped to the chain on my gate, claiming that my land was part of a future development zone under the subdivision's community growth plan. They worded it as though I was simply a holdout who needed to fall in line. I actually laughed when I first read it, assuming it was a clerical error. But then came the letters, thicker each time, full of phrases like mandatory compliance, special assessments, and subject to enforcement. I remember holding that second envelope and feeling more confused than angry. How could people be so bold as to try to claim something that wasn't even in their jurisdiction? At first I tried to be reasonable. I wrote back politely in closing. A copy of my deed. I highlighted the parcel number, the acreage, the boundaries that had been surveyed and filed decades before the HOA even existed. I explained as gently as I could that my land was not and never had been part of their association. For a while, I thought that would end it. But instead of backing off, they doubled down. The HOA president sent me a typed letter dripping with condescension saying that in time, all properties adjacent to the subdivision would be subject to association rules for the good of the community. When I asked for a meeting to clear things up, they laughed in my face, literally laughed, telling me it was inevitable I'd have to give in. That was the day something shifted in me. I stopped trying to explain and started planning. I spent nights at the county clerk's office, going through old plat maps, deed transfers, and zoning documents. The more I read, the more I realized they weren't just being pushy, they were laying the groundwork to absorb my land into their development. They had already filed a proposal with the county to expand community amenities onto my field, complete with drawings of a clubhouse, tennis courts, and a parking lot. And here's the kicker, they had submitted it without owning the land. That should have been laughable, but paperwork has a way of gaining momentum. That's when I dug deeper, past the surface deed into the mineral rights. And sure enough, buried in an old folder from 1954, I found it. The mineral rights had never been sold, never been separated from the surface deed, and they were still in my family's name. It meant that no one could legally build on or alter the land without my consent, not unless they wanted to be dragged into a very expensive legal battle from then on. My weekends weren't just about walking the field. They were about photographing boundary markers, copying every threatening letter, documenting every attempt they made to access my property. They even tried to cut a path through my hedgerow one afternoon. I called the sheriff, had a report filed, and added that to the folder. My neighbors started going quiet around me, whispering when I walked past. Some of them clearly thought I was being stubborn. Others avoided me out of fear of the board. My family worried I was taking it too seriously. But I knew better. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was building a wall of evidence, brick by brick, waiting for the day they pushed 1 inch too far. That day came at the so-called community planning meeting, when they unveiled glossy posters showing a future clubhouse right where my grandfather's well still sat. They called it a donated parcel, as if I had already agreed. I let them talk. I let the applause ripple through the crowd. And when the floor opened for comments, I stepped forward with a manila folder so thick it barely closed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just laid out copies of my deed, the mineral rights, the sheriff's incident reports, and the county clerk's notarized letters. Page after page of proof that not only did I own the land, but I owned every inch beneath it, meaning any construction without my signature was illegal. The room went so silent you could hear the HV kick on. The HOA leaned over, whispered something to the president, and the color drained right out of her face. The aftermath was slow but sure. Their development proposal was withdrawn within weeks. The president who had mocked me so confidently resigned under personal reasons. The fines and letters stopped cold. Neighbors who had once looked at me with suspicion started nodding politely, some even stopping to say they hadn't realized the HOA had overstepped so badly. As for me, I went back to walking my field, back to sitting by the well in the evenings, listening to the wind in the trees. I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I knew where to look, because I respected the land enough to understand its history, and because I refused to be bullied into surrendering what was mine. Now, when I drive past the subdivision, the same board members who used to send threats either wave stiffly or turn their eyes away. Either way, it's quiet again. And that, after everything, is all I ever wanted.